let's talk a little bit about Arkansas State before I wrap this show up, because we're already just a touch over time. Arkansas State is a not great team. Offensively, they like to get up and down the field a little bit. Jalen Raynor, their quarterback, was he played last year against Iowa State. He's a dynamic athlete. He runs around. He can buy time in the pocket. He can beat you in the running game. He will throw picks. Their running game is decent. It's not great, but it's okay. Their leading running back is averaging like 2.8 yards a carry. But they have another guy that's averaging like 10. The real key here is you bottle them up, hold them to, a couple touchdowns, 2-3 touchdowns. Arkansas State's defense is really, really horrible. Last week, they gave up 300 yards on the ground to Arkansas State. I would imagine Iowa State's probably going to try to attack that there. This is a game where Iowa State should be able to go down, take care of business, dominate the line of scrimmage, get out of here with, a couple touchdown win. And hopefully you see, curious which backup quarterback we might see. Yeah, it'd be interesting. It sounds like Mansky played against South Dakota because Connor Moberly was hurt, from what I understand. I don't know if he's still hurt. He was on the sideline for the Iowa game, in pads. My guess is we'll see Mansky, because Mansky looked pretty good against South Dakota, and I think generally speaking, he's believed to be kind of the future of the program. Whenever Rocket leaves, probably after next season. So Mansky would take over in 27. But, we'll see. It just either way, you just want to get to the game where you can justify putting in backups in the middle of the third quarter like they did against South Dakota. Ideally, that's where you're at. If the defense takes care of business, Iowa State should win this game by a few touchdowns. I think they're 21.5 point favorites right now, if you're into that thing, if you're into that kind of thing. And, I would guess Iowa State should be able to cover that fairly easily. So this is definitely just a go down, take care of business type of deal for Iowa State. One thing I do want to touch on before we wrap up today. So this past weekend, Iowa State had a pretty significant list of visitors come into town to visit for the Cy-Hawk game, as far as recruiting targets goes. Specifically, you had a number of 4-star recruits, actually. Let me just pull it up here real quick. They had a lot of guys in town. Let me see here. So this is from 247 Sports. Shout out Alec Bussey, who does a great job covering Iowa State. They had 4-star receiver Landon Bloom for the 20. These are all 2027 guys. 4-star receiver Landon Bloom. You have Isaiah Hanson from running back from Norwalk. You have 3-star borderline 4-star lineman from Dowling, Carter Barrett. Carter Barrett specifically is a really interesting prospect because he is holding offers from basically everybody. He's got an Alabama offer there. He's got Alabama, Arkansas, Kansas State, Maryland, Minnesota, Missouri, Nebraska, Ole Miss, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Wisconsin. Add a couple more on there, and you got a Johnny Cash song. And so he's a big time recruit as well. Couple other unranked guys from Pleasantville, from Sioux City East. James, there's kind of two big fish, besides the first two I talked about. The next two that are really big ones, Israel Abrams, who is the main quarterback target for the 2027 class. 4-star guy. He's got Wisconsin, Kentucky, Tennessee. I think I've seen a lot of coverage from the Wisconsin side of it via Iowa State 247 alum Nick Osen. Great dude, by the way. If you're at all interested in Wisconsin in any way, shape, or form, Nick Osen does a good job for them. But Israel Abrams, big target for Iowa State. Quarterback for class, number 5 quarterback in the class. Dual threat guy. I had a chance to watch some tape on him yesterday. Does a great job improvising in the pocket. Throws a good deep ball. Mechanics are a little funky, but not like necessarily in a bad way. Just they look a little weird. But it's stuff that's really, really easy to clean up. He's a high-end prospect. And then Will Slagle, who, as you can see, has a crystal ball to Iowa State. 4-star interior offensive lineman. He is the number 1 player from the state of Iowa, number 5 interior offensive lineman in the country in his class in 2027, and is currently has a crystal ball to go to Iowa State. And notably, that crystal ball actually is from one of the Iowa writers, for what it's worth. The fact that Iowa State is potentially the favorite for / definitely in the race for a guy like this is notable. This is a guy that, through most of Kirk Ferentz's tenure, this is a guy that goes to Iowa 10 times out of 10. And Iowa State being in the running for / maybe in the lead for the number 1 player in Iowa, who is an offensive lineman instead of Iowa, tells you, I think, where the two programs are right now in terms of just like which one is more notable, which one is headed the right direction, which one is the better program right now. John Kurtz on a number of channels on YouTube. If anyone has ever seen John Kurtz, he's a Big 12 / Kansas State guy. He actually said on his podcast, I think it was yesterday, that Iowa State has passed. He believes Iowa State has passed in terms of the quality of the program. Iowa State has passed both Iowa and Kansas State right now. They're obviously our 2 main rivals. So what's worth noting here also with Israel Abrams is that while 247 does not have anything as far as a crystal ball on him, the On3, one of the other recruiting services, On3 does have a crystal ball in to Iowa State for Israel Abrams. So potentially, Iowa State could have just turned this Cyhawk game into not 1, not 2, but maybe even 3, or potentially even a 4th, blue chip prospect, a quarterback, 2 offensive linemen, and a receiver. That would be massive. Massive. I know they already had like Jeffrey Roberts, the commit. He was at the game. They had a few other guys there as well, but if you were somehow to land the trio of Landon Bloom, Israel Abrams, and Will Slagle, that's a massive, this recruiting weekend goes down like in Cyclone lore as far as just the quality of players that you get on that recruiting visit alongside how that game went and everything. In a game which, a lot of the dialogue this week has been about, whether or not if Iowa State is now kind of the quote unquote premier program in the state, which anybody that's been listening to anything that I've recorded in the last year and a half is that I have been beating the drum that Iowa State is the cooler program right now. And right now you could argue Iowa State is the better program. That if you're especially an offensive player within the state of Iowa, you're better off going to Iowa State right now because you're going to have a better shot at the playoff, and the program just wins more right now. Yeah, Otts had some basketball prospects in town, and what better showcase could you ask to have for prospective recruits than that whole weekend with the crowd, with how the game went, the way the team fought back. Couldn't have had a better showcase for everybody. Interesting question here. Well, this will be the last one to do before I wrap up. How many years Kirk have left? Or do they fire him? So Iowa cannot / will not fire him. Kirk will be leaving on his own terms. Will he get the Dan McCarney thing where they kind of just push him out type of thing and say, hey, it's about time? Maybe, but Kirk has earned the right to leave whenever he wants. They pretty much have to hang on to him for a while. They have to hang on to him as long as Kirk wants to be there. How much longer Kirk wants to be there, who knows? With as bad as this offense could be this year, like if the offense continues to be really horrible after they just paid Mark Gronowski $2 million to go there, he may feel like this season could be enough to break be the straw that broke the camel's back and make Kirk decide that the game has started to pass him by. I shouldn't say started to. The game passed him by a decade ago. He just, did a good job of somehow resisting it. But this may be the season to recognize that the game has started to pass him by and that his way of doing things is no longer the best way of doing things. So it could be the end of this season. But my guess is the max. I would set the over under on Kirk's years left in Iowa City. I would set the over under right now at 2.5. I think, but honestly, if at the end of this year Iowa is 5-7 or 6-6, maybe they miss a bowl game because the offense is just horrible and the defense has started to take a step back, I could see Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker both retiring at the end of the season. Would not shock me. In which case Iowa is then entering as a scenario where they have the most critical hire in program history. Where if they get the hire wrong, Iowa can fall by the wayside and become Illinois. Illinois is a bad example because they're good now, but they can become an also ran pretty fast. I don't think Chris Klieman would be. If you'd asked me like 3 years ago, if Kirk had retired 2 or 3 years ago, I think Chris Klieman would be at the very top of Iowa's list. If after the 2022 season, Kirk retired right after Kansas State wins the Big 12 title, and Kirk and Iowa is looking for a coach in that offseason, Chris Klieman is almost certainly the very top of Iowa's coaching candidates list. No doubt about it. And we're all having a bad time if that happens. However, since then, Kansas State is now falling apart. Their program is starting to lose some luster after, in a kind of a second wave after the Bill Snyder era. And, Kansas State fans are starting to lose some faith in Chris Klieman. Kleiman's also very old, not very old. He's old enough to retire. He had some family issues this past offseason. My guess is that this is Chris Kleiman's last stop. My guess is that when he's done, he's done. Depending on what Stoops, their answers range between hell fucking no and probably not, but that would be really funny. There is a 0% chance Bob Stoops comes back to coach Iowa. It's not happening. I guarantee you he is not interested in rebuilding that program because it's not a roster that one transfer portal class can fix. It's not. It's going to take like 3 years at minimum for them to overhaul that roster enough to be able to be the kind of team that Bob Stoops would want to be. Mark Stoops is a really funny name. Now, there's no reason for Mark Stoops to leave Kentucky. He makes a bunch of money there. There is no pressure on him to win whatsoever. It's about as cushy as it gets for a mediocre coach. But if Iowa did hire Mark Stoops, it'd be pretty funny because I think it would go very poorly. How long till CMC rumors to Iowa start? I mean, Iowa fans can start them if they want, but there's literally no shot. The only way that would even have a shot at happening is like somehow Kirk hangs on for 8 years and the Big 12, dissolves somehow and Iowa State gets left out of, whatever, the SEC and the Big 10 break away and take some teams, but Iowa State's not involved. And Campbell wants to coach at the highest level. And let's say Iowa goes and Iowa State doesn't get taken to that. Like maybe that, but as in the current structure of things, there's no fucking shot. 0%. Kalen DeBoer would be a really funny one. The problem here is, Iowa Forms can discuss trying to get Campbell all they want. That's never going to fucking happen. Right now, I mean, what can Iowa offer him except for a little more money? like that's it. Iowa State offers him a path to the playoff, a supportive fan base, a roster he doesn't have to completely rebuild, and an AD, an athletic department, a university in a town that will bend over backwards to do anything he wants. There's no reason. There's no upside to Iowa that Iowa State can't offer him besides money, which we've already learned doesn't fucking matter to match Campbell. To Matt Campbell. DeBoer is a funny one because one, he's probably going to need a job. However, Alabama's roster is much closer. I mean, I don't think people realize the program overhaul that would need to happen, that will need to happen at some point whenever Iowa decides to hire a coach that wants to modernize things. I mean, we look at like what Luke Fickell has had to do at Wisconsin, completely rebuild the roster to, have a team that is capable of effectively throwing the football. So, and it's taken him multiple years, and it's been a rocky road so far. And frankly, it's probably in one of those situations where Luke Fickell does all the dirty work and eventually gets fired because he doesn't win fast enough. But then the next coach takes over and can take a couple tweaks and then is good with a Wisconsin Badgers team that throws the football. The roster overhaul required to modernize Iowa versus what Luke Fickell has had to do at Wisconsin is night and day. Iowa is so far behind, even where Wisconsin was in terms of modernizing their football team, their program, their roster, miles behind. This is not a 2-year project or a 1 or 2 year project for Iowa. This is a 5-year complete overhaul of the program to recruit and develop skill players and quarterbacks and whatever else. Because they're not gonna. I mean, maybe they can get some duct tape players. Yeah, if you brought in Kalen DeBoer, maybe you can get some duct tape players in the transfer portal. But you're going to be relying on duct tape solutions for 2 to 4 years, basically, before you can get the roster completely overhauled to where Iowa can be competitive as a modern football team. It's going to be a long, painful road for Iowa, and I hope it sucks. I hope it sucks. I hope they have a terrible time. I hope they slide into irrelevance and Matt Campbell just sits there and beats the shit out of them for a decade. I hope that happens because I want Iowa fans to experience the pain of being a bad football program and just getting completely demolished by their rival for a decade plus. I would love nothing more of them for that to happen. I hold deep and sincere animus against the Iowa football program. I want them to be miserable for as long as they can be miserable. I want them to be clear. So fuck the Hawks. We're going to win this weekend against Arkansas State, but the guys need to be ready to go. It's going to be hot. Fatigue is going to be an issue. Get it together. Get into this weekend, get a win by a couple touchdowns, get to your bye week, get healthy, get rested for the first time since the beginning of the season, then get started in Big 12 play and get off to a good start. Iowa State can be knocking on the door of the top 10 by the time Arizona comes to town. Let's do that. Once again, fuck the Hawks, go Cyclones. Everybody have a great rest of your week. We'll catch you guys again on Saturday after the game for a post-game call-in show. Once again, but we'll be right after the end of the game this time since it's an away game and not, a few hours after the game since I don't have to drive home this time. So everybody have a great rest of your week. Go Cyclones.